Hello, welcome back to How to RPG. It's Star Wars Day. Today it's all about Star Wars. I've been holding off on doing this for a while, and today is the day I finally talk about Star Wars 5e. Yes, it exists. It's out there. Um, there's quite a lot to say, and frankly, I'm unsure I can cover everything in one live stream. I'm going to do my best to cover as much as I possibly can. I don't expect that I will be successful. I will probably have to follow up at some time and talk more about Star Wars 5e in another live stream, not just today. Anyway, my suggestion is grab some food, some drink, make sure you're comfortable, and we'll get started, and I will cover this fairly quickly, and then I'm going to show you a lot of stuff as well. What you see before you is not Star Wars 5e. What you see here is Star Wars Saga. That's a different game. Anyway, but I thought I would at least, since I have so many of these books, I'll at least show you some of them. Anyway, let's do this. Where are we? Hi, welcome to How to RPG. My name is Fred Wheeler, and today I want to talk about role-playing games. One of my favourite role-playing games is Star Wars Saga, but I'm going to talk about Star Wars 5e. In fact, Star Wars 5e is one of those games which, much to my surprise, until just recently in the last year or so, I found out about, and I wanted to talk about it for quite a long time. So there are, in fact, 4 free fan-made Star Wars 5e compatible documents that are available. You don't have to pay anything, and they use the Dungeons & Dragons 5e rules. What I will say about it is created by a number of people. So Gilphil and many other people are the creators of Star Wars 5e and their supplements. These are PDFs. There is the Star Wars Player's Handbook for 5e, and is 318 pages long, and it has everything that you really need as a player. There's also the Scum Villainy book, which has 196 pages in the PDF. And this is your monster book and your vehicle book. Then we have the Starships of the Galaxy book, which has 120 pages in the PDF, and this is all about starships. Then we have the Wretched Hives book, and that has 230 pages in the PDF, and this is your Game Master Guide. All the books are professional with an excellent layout and artwork. There are the odd error or mistakes, but generally it's hard to find them unless you look very carefully. The artwork and illustrations are of a high quality with professional colour images, often taken from the internet, but not always. Not all the books have a table of contents, unfortunately, or an index or appendix, and in some cases, or in many cases, they do in fact need to have both the contents page and an index to make it easy to find everything. The books are almost complete and generally have everything that you need. There are 30 Star Wars species to choose from. A species is just a race. There are 10 new Star Wars classes with additional subclasses to select from that are specific to that setting. There are 20 new Star Wars backgrounds that you can select, and there are rules for customizing your background as well, just like you would have with D&D 5e. There is an extensive range of Star Wars weapons, armor, equipment, and upgrades, and when I say this, I can't overstate it enough. There is so much here, more than you would possibly need. There are 65 new Star Wars feats, that's just in the player's handbook, and there are more additional feats in other supplements or books that have been released. There are many Star Wars spaceships and vehicles to utilize, including probably even more upgrades for those vehicles than you can possibly imagine. There are specific Starship Combat rules that are detailed, so it actually explains how to deal with Starship Combat. There's a lot of force powers for Star Wars in the player's handbook that you can use, and there's included, one of these books is a bestiary book, It's a monster manual, and it has different creatures, monsters, robots, aliens, and of course vehicles, but all of that's there. What you need as a game master has been pretty much dedicated to one book, and there are other books that will be very useful to you, but there's a lot of stuff to help you create your Star Wars adventure. There's a huge selection of downtime activities in the Richard Hives book, and there's a lot of little extras for the Star Wars galaxy and universe. The supplements are amazing for a Star Wars campaign book. For something that was done really as a fan-made project, it's kind of amazing. I've always found it more than impressive. Out of everything out there that has been made by fans, Star Wars 5e is by far one of the most superior products out there. Now, I hope this was useful to you and interesting, and if it was, great. Go down into the description and you will find a link to all of the documents that I've talked about. There's a website for it all. Go find it, try it out. I want to thank Gillifil and all of his contributors have done a fantastic job. I want to thank you for watching and listening. And hey, till next time, maybe try playing some Star Wars and keep rolling those 20s. Okay, so that was just a really quick breakdown. Now, you'll notice that I have not commented on the quality of things. I could do that, but I'm going to just show you and talk through some of the different things that you'll find in these books. I think that's probably the best way to approach this, rather than to... I always struggle with the concept of being critical of a product made by people who do not really get paid. Now, Gillifil did have a Patreon. Gillifil is no longer involved in the website. He was originally, but it has been passed on to somebody else, and you'll find this out in a second because I'm going to show you the website. I'm going to go through the player's handbook. I'm going to go through some of the Scum and Villainy stuff, depending on how much time I have. And I'm also going to probably go through the Starships of the Galaxy, the Richard Hives book. I'm going to be fairly quick, so if I'm scrolling too fast, I do apologize. So for those of you who are here, so hi, F Hubber is a patron. Thank you for being here. And if you can cover 5 books in one stream, they'd be empty books. They're not empty books. They're very, very dense. Hello, Prepare, Cook and Survive. Nice to have you here. And we have Pale Rider, of course. So I'm going to pull up my phone, and I'll try to track it on my phone, the chat. I'm not necessarily going to comment on everything that you say here because I just don't think it's going to be plausible. But if you have a specific question, maybe that's what I should do. If you have a specific question or something you want me to comment on, go hashtag, okay, rather than hashtag question, so it stands out so I know. Okay, if you have real question or want feedback on something. I think that's probably the best way to do that. Otherwise, this is going to be too difficult to manage. All right. A list of Jedi backgrounds. Oh, come on. Yeah, I don't know about 5 parsecs. Anyway, let's move over to the screen that we need to be looking at, and then we're going to go from there. I have all of the documents pulled up and ready to go, so that's good news, right? Anyway, so when I was putting together my presentation for this, and it's not coming up, why is that? Oh, there we go. There we go. It just took a little while to update, but we've got it now. Cool. Awesome. I'm happy about that. And we'll transfer it over. There it is. I'm taking my hat off. It's too hot. It is so warm. In fact, I think I should open the door to my office so that I don't pass out. All right, here we go. So this is the Star Wars 5e website. This is where everything has been housed. Now, whether that is on the actual website, the information is actually provided on the website so you can access it, or you can download a PDF. So it is possible to download a user PDF if you want to. There's a bit of a process, but it's not that complicated. I think I got a little bit lost initially, but if you look in the right places, you'll realize there is a place where the assets can be downloaded. And you can see there are 4 books. Now, there was actually supposed to be 6. They were working on 2 more books that they never actually finalized or finished. Maybe they'll get done in the future, I don't know. But because Gallifel is no longer associated with Star Wars 5e and its creation and its pulling it all together and doing all the layout and stuff like that, because he's no longer involved, I think those projects quite possibly aren't going to go forward. They were going to provide you with another creature or monster book, and they were going to also provide you with another book or supplement on I'm not entirely sure. I think it was a campaign setting or something like that. I can't remember. It might have even been the Starships, but it's been a while since I remember seeing the information on this. But I know that there was supposed to be a second monster creature alien book being put out. So let's go through each one of these, and I'm going to start with the player's handbook. I think that is probably the first one we need to actually look at. And if I go here, this is it here. Right, here we go. This is the one I'm after. This is the player's handbook for Star Wars 5e. If you look at it initially, you would think, well, gosh, that almost looks like a professional product put out by any kind of publisher that does this for as a professional job, but it's not. Okay, it just looks that way. So let's work our way through here. This is the table of contents. The table of contents does extend on. There's more than one page for the table of contents. It's not one page, and you'll see that it covers everything from your species. It has all the rules to play the game. So all of the 5e rules have been ported over into this book, so you do not need to have the Dungeons and Dragons 5e rules to play this game. You just need this book. This book has all the rules for role-playing, all the different mechanics that you would use, combat, even Starship Combat is included in here. So all of that is already there. It has all the classes, the subclasses, backgrounds are listed. You've got your equipment, and there's so much equipment. If you want to customize, in other words, if you want to multi-class, there's rules around multi-classing the different classes as well. And you'll also find a huge rundown on chapters that cover what essentially would be spells, but now that you're not dealing with spells, you're dealing with force powers, tech powers. There's even maneuvers, things that you can use in terms of that. Okay, the tech and force casting is a big part of the book as well. Okay, let's roll on through here. Here we have the credits. I'm not going to go through this, but Gallifel, as I said, is the main person behind that, and he is credited here. And then he has listed all of his patrons and anybody who was involved. The contributors are actually listed, so there's quite a few. I don't know if they're all still involved in this project, but they probably are. Assets, art assets, all listed, and who has created them. So some of these art assets were actually created for the book. Right. Your introduction, how the game runs, how the game uses dice, the 20-sided dice roll, all this stuff, advantage, disadvantage, the 3 pillars of play. These are all just tailored for the type of Star Wars campaign you're likely to play. There's a step-by-step process for building a character. It looks identical. There's just a little bit of difference in wording. It's identical to D&D 5e. There's nothing particularly different about it. It pretty much follows the same process. And then going down through choosing equipment, they probably go into maybe, I would say about the same amount of detail as anything else. About the same amount of detail. Some of the artwork obviously has been pulled from the movies, whether they're old movies or new movies, it's definitely there. Okay, species. Now, with species, it breaks down species just as you would be normally used to, but there's 30 of them. instead of the number, you know, you had maybe enough you could count on two hands in the D&D 5e Player's Handbook. This has got 30. Playing a different species is a big deal. Not playing a human is actually quite common. A lot of people like the idea of playing robots, and you can play a droid. So somebody's going to ask me, they always do, can I play a droid? Yes, there are many types of droids that you can play if you want to. We have the Bith traits. I'm not going to go over them. Basically, it breaks it down to things. I'm not going to go over all the mechanics, but you have things that relate to them. They have trance, which is kind of like the elf. They've got some languages. They're programmers. They're good with computers and things like that. They're good with details around orientation, and they're also pretty good with music, and that's another factor of that particular race. And they do this to every single species here. And I think the word species is much more appropriate in Star Wars than anywhere else, but I think, frankly, it should probably always be used. But race seems to feel like a denomination of a particular species. So you can have variations of a species. But anyway, it doesn't matter. So each one has something that makes them special and stand out and interesting. They're not necessarily going to be balanced. What you'll find here is a lot of the time things have been built that make sense for the species in Star Wars and how they would play in the game. So no doubt there will be a whole bunch that will break or be better or be looked at by a power gamer as being superior to something else. So as a game master, you probably need to be all right with something like that. And all of it is there. It's all laid out. When I said droids, and there's more than one droid, you get class 1 droids, you can play a class 2 droid, and they break it down into terms of what they might look like and the sorts of things they can do. So there's a lot of customization available within just the species alone. Yes, possibly. One of the things that I think is interesting, and so you've probably already noticed Bane here, but Duros are one of those things that I always found it was always nice to have either a Wookiee or Duros in your campaign, because I played Star Wars. Ewoks, I don't know about them, but anyway, you can play anything that you can think of. There's so many different options. And yes, you can play a Gungan. And of course you can play humans. That would be pretty obvious. Now the races are built in such a way that they're not particularly tailored towards one thing or another. So it's not like that they will necessarily be more suitable as a Jedi or a fighter with a pistol or something like that. It's not necessarily built that way. As I said, they are just built to represent the race in the Star Wars universe as you would expect them to be. And that's it. And there's a lot of information. And it's well laid out. It's well structured. It's well thought out. There's been probably hours taken just mulling over this and trying to get things right. I think there's probably less egregious race features in this book than I've seen in Monsters of the Multiverse that Wizards of the Coast put out. I think this has actually probably done a far better job than they did. You might say that's probably pretty easy to do, but anyway. Yeah, so now we're going to get into the classes, and they are broken up, and I'll cover them in a second. Now, I'll at least tell you what they are, and then we'll scroll through, and you can have a look at the layout. What do you got here? Sharpshooter. Yes, you can play anything you can think of. You can play in this game. Stormtroopers. Yeah, sure. Because they wear hats, I like Duros. Well, I thought Stormtroopers can miss anything. Okay, so the classes you can play. You have your Berserker. That's your melee combatant. I might actually just zoom this in a little bit because this is quite small. And although you can see the basic layout, it's not terribly useful for those of you who are in a live stream. And maybe we can do bigger than that. Okay. There we go. So the classes basically broken up into Berserker, which is your melee combatant utilizing rage. It's kind of like your barbarian. The Counselor, which is your Force wielder, uses their focus to manipulate the Force and use Force powers. You have your Engineer, which is basically your tech caster, who use enhanced items to benefit their allies. So basically, you're a technician. Like you're good at mechanics. You're an engineer. The Fighter. So basically, it's supposed to be the versatile form of the combatant. Somebody who's good at range and melee, or can do both. You know, one or the other, or both. But you probably want to, with Star Wars, you'll probably want to be good at everything if you can. And both is always a nice thing. Guardian, force wielding specialist, which is more melee. You have the Monk, which is an unarmed combatant using focus for to sort of power their abilities. You have the Operative, so they're a controller who focus on stealth and techniques. You have your Scholar, which is more the academic, who uses their wits and allies to control the battlefield. You have your Scout, which is basically a pop in and out, have a few tech powers, have weapons available to them. They're a combatant as well. But yes, you're a mobile sort of unit. And then you have your Sentinel. This is your Force wielder who blends sort of melee combat with the Force. And if you're going to play something like a Jedi, you could probably, I think the Sentinel is probably the best sort of fit for that. But you could still use something like the Guardian class if you wanted to play a Jedi. And you could, to a certain degree, still use the Counselor. That's also another choice. Okay, all right. So let's just keep going through so you can sort of see. Oh, okay, so you're going to scroll slow. The Berserker. Here we go. So you can see almost immediately when I said that the book layout and its presentation is really high quality. Gillithil has not spent a small amount of time thinking about all of this. He hasn't taken a small amount of time to put it together. It is highly professional. And I think I found one mistake in all 4 books when I was going through them. Now, I'm sure if I went through more carefully and scrutinized things for hours and hours and hours, I might find more. But it's really a solid product. If there was anything that could shift your group from playing Dungeons & Dragons 5e to playing a sci-fi setting, it's this book here. This should be able to do it. If you wanted to play that sort of thing, you should be able to do it with this product. Because, 1, it's free. 2, it's no more complicated than the Player's Handbook already. I know it's not on D&D Beyond, okay, and it won't ever be legally able to go up on D&D Beyond. So players will still have to learn how to build characters. I am certainly considering the possibility of doing some character building on my channel as live streams using these rules. I think I would certainly see a benefit to doing so, just so that people can see that process, make it a little bit easier for those of you who are game masters trying to get people to shift to do something like that. I think that would be a smart idea. But again, if you look at everything, it's the print is good, it's clear, it gives you the information you need, and I think it's well designed. That's not to say that everything in here is well designed, because that's not true. Slow day at the cantina, only 3 people who owe. Is that right? Really? Okay. Okay, so, and let's keep going down here. Way of suggestion. So, as I said, each class has 4 different subclasses. So, if you decide to play an engineer, you can play 4 different types of engineers. You don't have to just be pigeonholed into one. I guess what I find interesting about a product like this is that, one, there's so many people who've been involved. It's so well done, and this is just the first book. This is page 71. We're talking about 318 pages of ideas, concepts, and specific mechanics built that you can use in your game. And it's done in such a way as to try to capture everything that you might ever want to do. So it's all here. You don't have to worry about anything being missed out or left out or not included, because frankly it's all there. Now, I'm going to just scroll through here very quickly because I know my voice is going to give out. Had a pretty hard day yesterday, people, so it's going to be a bit hard. I'm going to find this difficult. So if anybody remembers the Surge, the Wild Magic Surge table for the Sorcerer, the Wild Magic Sorcerer, well, you have a Surge table here for the Engineer. I thought this was very clever, and if you notice, they've come up with pretty much 50 different ideas, 50 different things that could potentially happen. That's just to make the Engineer more interesting. Literally, they've done that. I thought that's brilliant. I need a lozenge. Sorry about this, people. I'm just going to just grab one now. Otherwise, I'll lose my voice. I really want to make sure I show you everything in Scum and Villainy as well. I'll just make sure I just seal this up if I don't. The ants here are carrying everything. They're even trying to carry the water away. It's been a bit nuts, actually. Anyway, let's keep going. So this is the fighter. Gives you a breakdown of everything you might need. I like the fact that they've got the red contrast against the sort of the light blue. And then you've got your print in black. Makes a big difference. It's very easy to actually read. I think it's probably even easier to read than the player's handbook, in my opinion, just because of the color selection. Red headings on a light blue background work really well. Yes, you can be a tactical specialist if you wanted to be. The Guardian, which is pretty much a version of your Jedi, they've sort of got a different focus to everything else. There are essentially 3 classes, as I said, that are spellcasters or force powered, okay, and those are the ones you want to try to pick up if you want to be a Jedi, or even if you're playing a Sith character, because there's potential to be doing something that's very similar to that. One of the interesting things about Star Wars Saga, and this isn't Star Wars Saga, is they used dark side points. I find that very interesting as a mechanism for determining going to the dark side, losing your character because of the way they are being portrayed by the players. It's a very clever idea. All right. We have the monk. The monk is one of my favorite classes. That's in D&D 5e, and they have included it here. So if you wanted to be able to just beat the snot out of somebody with your fists and your feet, do a bit of headbutting, elbows, knees, multiple attacks. It is built very much like what you're probably used to. They have called them focus points. So instead of it being what we had, I think they're currently calling them discipline points, but now you get focus. Focus is just basically key points that you'll be familiar with from Dungeons and Dragons. Have they built them so that they are better or than the D&D 5e version? Not necessarily. Not necessarily. But there are a couple of other things here, or a few twists and turns that weren't included before as well. And there are things that you can drop in and out too. So you do have there is customization. They've considered that. Jar Jar brain damaged bard. A brain damaged bard? Really? Okay. Let's keep going. As you can see, pretty impressive. Some of the artwork may not be as good as you might like, but this is probably because it's been done by somebody else, poured it in. I've magnified this up to 250%, so you might notice a little bit of graininess. That's just so that you can read the text, okay? That's the only reason you'll probably find that the artwork looks a little bit off, because I've magnified it so much. Let's keep going. We are on page 111, and we still haven't come out of the classes sections. So one of the largest sections of the book are the classes. Probably the vast majority of the book is just class information rather than anything else. And that's certainly taking up the most space. One of the sections that you'll find that is not huge is the force powers. There aren't a huge number of force powers because you don't need to have them. You don't need that many. Here's the scholar. And there's a fly flying around me, which is making life a little bit interesting. But keep going down. So the scholar is really sort of intended to be somebody who's just really knowledgeable. It's not like you're playing a wizard. You are literally just really good when it comes to languages and knowing stuff. And yes, you can play a gambler if you wanted to. Each one of the subclasses sort of delves into sort of a stereotypical Star Wars type character that you might want to play in the game. Tactical pursuit. There we go. And now we're on to the scout. Scouts are exactly what you might think. A scout is going to be something like Boba Fett. Scouts are going to be your so to start the Stormtrooper Scouts. There's Stormtrooper Scouts with jetpacks, things like that. They're going to be these types of characters here. You can still play, if you want to play a clone in Star Wars, you could do that. It wouldn't be that hard to do. You could use the Scout, and you could use the Fighter, and you could use a couple of other different classes. And because you can combine things, because of multi-classing, it gives you even more options than before. So that this game is going to last you a long, long time. It's not like it is a second-class citizen whatsoever. And the Sentinel, again, another Force user that also has melee skills and a couple of different pathways you can take. Some good, some bad. Really, most of the classes and subclasses, there's very few that are tailored towards something that is of a particular type. Path of the Shadows is obviously targeted towards playing more of a Sith-like character or Dark Force power character, for sure. This is 143, and we're looking at personality and backgrounds. You're going to find pretty much every background that you will need, but again, what they've done here is they've ensured that you have a customization process. The customization process for backgrounds is put at the front. It's very short. It gives you a breakdown on how to do it. It's literally like a paragraph, and that is forward facing. It's not at the back. So the intention is that you probably would do that for your character. But if you don't have the time and you want to see how it's done, they provide you with all sorts of types of backgrounds you might expect. The agent is very similar to the agent that already exists. Bounty hunter, again, where there's a bounty hunter in D&D. It is just tailored towards Star Wars. Criminal, if you want to play a criminal. Entertainer, essentially the same in many respects. Force Adept is very specific, so that's been built from pretty much from scratch. The Gambler would be very similar to what you're used to. And then we've got the Investigator. There's always somebody who wants to play an Investigator. Jedi is keyed specifically. So the intention is if you're going to play a Jedi-like character, then you probably, this is the background you take, is take the Jedi background. And this has been built specifically for this. If you want to play a Mandalorian, you can. So if you're a fan of the Mandalorian TV series or Disney Plus series, you can do that. Mercenaries are here. The Mercenary is pretty similar. Noble and Nomad. So if you're playing something like a desert folk, that would be the one. An Outlaw, if you want to play sort of more like a Han Solo character or Lando character or something like that. Or even just even bounty hunters and outlaws might be mixed up. Pirates, if you want to play a pirate. So the pirate is very much like the sailor. Scientist, if you want to be a scientist. Scoundrel. So I guess a different version of the concept of having a criminal. And then the Sith. So if you want to be specifically connected to the Sith, you would select that background to do that. Scouts are not red shirts. No, scouts in this game would be very, very tough to deal with. If you want to play a smuggler, there you go. You've got a background for that. Soldier is pretty much the same as in most respects to the one in the D&D 5e book. A spacer, somebody who just travels in space a lot. And then we move on into the next section, which is equipment. Now, equipment is massive. If you thought that you got a lot of equipment in Dungeons & Dragons 5e, you have no idea. Because the player's handbook provides you with equipment. But once you start looking into the supplements beyond that, okay, there's even more. There is just such a huge range of stuff. They've figured it all out for you. It's there, it's available. And if your players want to delve further into the gear, equipment, weapons, armor, stuff, they can. It's not a problem. A lot of this, I think, has probably been ported over from older versions of of Star Wars, like Star Wars Revised, West End Games Star Wars, but particularly the Star Wars Saga game. I don't think I see very much influence from the Edge of the Empire game that was put out by Fantasy Flight. I'm pretty sure it's Fantasy Flight. So yes, you've got all the gear that you might want. And yes, you can definitely have grenades. Don't worry. If you want a thermal detonator, thermal detonators are always a bad thing to be carrying around. Because if somebody decides to use it, they always wind up using it in a confined space, I've always found. Yes, you get jetpacks. They don't have images for everything. This book, you might notice, has a lot of art, but probably not quite as much art as you're used to. This is because it is a book with tools. It's supposed to give you the information that you require. It's not really designed to be put on a shelf and sold in a bookstore or game store or anything like that, because this is fan-made. Pretty obvious, right? We're going into feats. We have the ace pilot, the alert, animal handler, armor, expert, acrobat, actor, athlete. Actor's pretty much what you would expect it to be. Athlete, again, probably about the same as well. Battle scarred, climber, competitor, bountiful luck. Yes, that's basically lucky. Brawny, charmer, commando. If you want the commando feat, you can take that. Crafter, entertainer, fanatic, dungeon delver, which is very much just the D&D 5e one. Durable, again, pretty much the same. Feigned confidence, fighting master, empathic. We have fighting styles, forceful vigor, force guidance. We have the form fighting dabbler, glazing presence, force of personality, haggler. Yes, if you want to haggle, you can. Force sensitive. Now, what you do with force sensitive as a feat, if you have a class that doesn't have force powers, you would superimpose force sensitive to be able to do that. That gives you the ability to actually use some force powers. Not a lot, but some. I have lucky. We have healer, lawmaster, inspiring leader, investigator, mariner, keen mind, which you're probably pretty familiar with. Linguist would be about the same. Medic, mobile, which will be about the same. Naturalist, observant, again, pretty much the same as what you're used to in D&D. Performer, power adept, power channeling, practiced, perceptive, promising commander, silver-tongued, quick-fingered, quick-witted, snappy injector, specialist, resilient, shard modification, stealthy, techie, supreme accuracy. In other words, it's essentially elven accuracy. Supreme attitude, threatening, tough. Yeah, tough is exactly what it sounds like. Weapon expert, survivalist, tech dabbler, and that's all your feats, and that's just in this book. If you go to the other supplements, you can find even more, okay? Now, I'm only on page 195, and we're not finished. The rules for the game in terms of combat are generally going to be listed in the following pages that we've got here. What I would like to do is actually skip over this, because Fighting Mastery, there's a whole lot of stuff you can do around weaponry and stuff like that that is also tied to the game. You get kind of like a dual purpose for those of you who are wondering how this works, you kind of, and to a large degree, you kind of get like, I think there's sort of like a class for on the ground and a class for in the air. So you have a few more choices you have to make in comparison to D&D 5e. The Sith hamster, really? Dual-wielding Sith Padman turned into light side. Okay. Pale Rider, no problems. You have to go. You have to go. I totally understand. Now, this is not just one book. This book is one thing, but we definitely have to jump over, and I think we should do it about now. So lightsaber forms. If you're familiar with lightsaber fighting, you'll know that there's a whole lot of different forms. You can actually pick a form. So if you have access and you're skilled with lightsabers, you can actually pick a form that's part of your repertoire. Okay, so we're going to jump over and look at Scum and Villainy. Why? Because this is a collection of deadly and amazing Star Wars creatures, monsters, aliens, robots, and there's some vehicles in here as well. It's 196 pages, so probably not as big as your monster manual for 5e D&D, but it's still got a whole bunch of stuff. All the credits are here, and here we go. A few of them will be already familiar. They might have similar names, but they operate differently. The Avatar of Aboleth, manifestations of that Aboleth, Ankle. Now, you probably remember this from Clone Wars in the arena. Flying creatures, a Star Wars dog, basically. You've got some robots, some assassin droids, if you want to put an assassin droid in there. There's a couple of different assassin droids, by the way. The stat blocks are all included. They're all clear. It's all marked out properly. Okay. Yes, if you want a BB series Astro droid, you can have that in the game. The asteroid droids are, of course, going to be there. Awakened shrubs. Largely, I feel like they're pretty much what you find in the D&D 5e book already, but they have included a couple of additional ones as well. Bantha. Did you know that the name Bantha actually comes from Edgar Rice Burroughs' Martian series, the book series, the Martian series of John Carter, the Princess of Mars, things like that. That's where the name Bantha was taken from. So you have your Bantha, got a couple. You've got your battle droids, your B1s. Of course, you'll need them if you're going to be battling droids. And you have your B2 super battle droid as well. A couple of different versions. And there's some specialist robots, including destroyer droids. So you've got to have destroyer droids at some point. There's a lot of droids. Like they spend a whole bunch of time covering that. Battle Hydra. There are dragons in Star Wars. Wildly. What's Wildly? What do we got here? Special Sith hamster power, the wheel. Sith hamster starts running in place, conjuring a wheel of power. Okay, all right. I'm sure that is wild. So we have a Battle Hydra, and you may recognize some of these creatures, maybe some of them you don't. The Bogwings, monks. Yes, you do get NPCs that you can use. So if you're wondering about that, yes, you absolutely do. There isn't necessarily artwork for every single creature in here, but they certainly do a good job of trying to do that. They include a monster stat block, which is the Canteen Brawl. So it acts like a swarm. It's a collection of aliens and creatures that are all fighting in a brawl. I thought it was a clever idea. Condor Dragon. Crowds, so you can actually use crowds. So if you're wanting to try to include things where you're using sort of like mass combat, there is some sort of stat blocks that are built as mass combat encounters. We've got some dark side spirits and lords. There's some troopers, death troopers, the Dewback. Some of you, I'm sure, are familiar. This is the creature that grabbed Luke Skywalker when he was in the garbage chute and dragged him down. So you got a couple of versions, the adolescent and the adult. We have the dragon snake, which looks pretty much like a dragon snake. We have some droid fighters. So you know how I was saying that there are vehicles in here? So the Vulture class fighter, tanks. They do include tanks, starships, and things in here as well. Is that the energy spider? It is. Okay. This is the big huge worm that was in the asteroid, and the Millennium Falcon parked itself inside there, and they had to fly out. So there's a couple of different versions for that. The Febar, which I'm not very familiar with at all. Skill Borers, Flesh Raiders. So Flesh Raiders are sort of like mutant combinations. They incorporate technology into them. They look a little bit like shark people, don't they? The Flutter Plume, which is nuts. Kind of reminds me of another creature in D&D. You will get galactic forces, so you can get the individual troops, but you can also get a squad of troops. You have a whole squad of troops will be a stat block in itself. Again, really clever design. Solves the problem of dealing with multiple targets. Typo correction. Oh, okay. Heavy troopers. So all the different types of stormtroopers and troopers that you require are here. I don't think they've left anything out. You need a speeder bike. You've got a speeder bike. You need an AT-AT. You've got the stat block. You want to have an AT-RT or just the AT-ST, which are the walkers. All the walkers are there. Even the stuff, the walkers that you would find in the Clone Wars. Tanks, droid tanks, things like that. So a lot of different things. These are mostly the sort of Imperial forces that you find in space. Gamorreans, if you want Gamorreans. The Guest. Geez, that's some pencil artwork there. I wonder where they pulled that from. I'm not too sure. Now this image here I know of because I'm pretty sure this has been pulled from Star Wars Saga, the role-playing game. Okay, and we have the Gorix, and you're probably familiar. Most people are familiar with the gandar. There's always that talk about being, having your arms pulled off by a gandar. Bad things. Don't want to deal with them. The Hawk Bat, which looks kind of silly, but anyway, let's keep going. So we're on page 81, and we're not quite halfway through. There's the droid that interrogated Princess Leia. Grand Inquisitors. So if you wanted to have Force users in your game, you have no problems. Jawas, not a problem. Got them. Got a few different versions. Junk droids. What else we got here? Moving through. I'm not familiar. Oh, hang on. This is sort of, what's his name? I wonder if they've included him as well. If you want a cyborg, you can have a cyborg. I wonder if they've included some of the more specialized characters. I wonder if they have. They probably have. I don't know if they have included. I didn't actually check to see if they included Darth Vader stat block or Luke Skywalker. I think it's tempting to play a campaign with some of the classic characters, but I don't know that you want to necessarily do that. I always found it better to actually assume that they've passed on, you're moving on, you're doing something else in a different place compared to everybody else. But yes, if they have them there, that would be quite interesting. There's the Minox that were chewing on the power cables on the Millennium Falcon. The Nexu, which was almost eating, Padman, almost ate Padman, if I remember right. That's that fish that almost swallowed a ship. We've got a few here, some insects. There's the pogs, those ridiculous bird-like creatures that look really tasty. It's not really, would you call it a raven? It looks more like a dodo bird, if you ask me. The power droid. Couple of different power droids here. Yes, if you want to have a C-3PO protocol droid, yes, you can do that. That's not going to be a problem. And Ragul. Yes, Rancor, and you cannot have a book. So there's more than one Rancor. There are four different Rancors, including an ancient Rancor, which means it's a legendary creature. Nice. This is the creature that Han Solo was transporting, 3 of them, that ate quite a few people. Raftar. Do not want to mess with Raftar. Derek, a couple of different options. Ronto. I've got a miniature for this. I don't know what I've never been able to figure out what I'm going to use it for, though. That's the problem. A few sea creatures. So if you want to use sea creatures, you can. The Sarlacc Pit. A lot of information on the Sarlacc Pit, even a nice drawing as well. And yes, a huge stat block, and it is a legendary creature. There's another monster I don't recognize. But anyway, let's keep going. Page 137, we're doing quite nicely. Steep. Swamp Slug. Tactical Droids. What else have we got here? I don't know. I don't really know. I'm not familiar with this one at all. I don't even think I've even played against one before. These little guys, you know, they seem like, the pit droids seem like a waste of time having a stat block, but gosh, we used them so many times. Even if you don't use the stat block, having information on them is quite useful. They're nice to have around. Tradishan warriors, always fun to have. They never seem to like anybody, unfortunately, but that's life. Tusken raiders. So you get a chieftain, you get a couple of different types. You get a raider, a brute. We've got that quite rather ridiculous looking lizard that made that horrible annoying noise that Obi-Wan was riding. You get a tree. Yes, you get a tree that will cause you all sorts of problems. Another dog-like creature. Everything's a dog. Wampers, snow wampers. You know what a wamper is. And we get a worm, wampa rats, Wookiees, bunch of Wookiees here. I wonder if we have the white spider. I don't know if they've included a stat block for that one. Miscellaneous beasts. So these are the things that sort of didn't fit in, and they've just put them near the end. We're on page 169. And yeah, so maybe not absolutely everything you're looking for is here. So key sort of legendary characters. Remember, when you're running a Star Wars campaign or a game, you don't really want to have you don't really want to have Princess Leia, Han Solo, Luke Skywalker showing up your players. You want them to be separated so they're creating their own story or adventures around their characters rather than somebody else's. And I've always found that having a stat block for those can generally just overshadow them. So it looks like they have left them out. So here we have mostly just your NPCs that are sort of fairly general. And there's quite a few of them. There's a few pages. It's probably more extensive than and probably should be, more extensive than the Monster Manual for 5e. But you also get an appendix, and it sorts it alphabetically, so you can see what the page is. This was probably better suited to put in the front of the book rather than the back of the book, but that's where they put it, in the back of the book. And then it sorts it by challenge rating, so it's not just alphabetical, but you also get it sorted by challenge rating. If you need to go through and find a particular challenge rating, it's sorted out by that. And that's the end of it. That's the monster book, okay? I've got a few more minutes, and I wanted to at least just talk about Starships of the Galaxy. Now, Starships of the Galaxy, there's another book called this, which is far superior than this PDF. Because if I scroll through here, and there's 120 pages, what you're probably expecting in here is vehicles, starships, rules around them, their stat blocks, probably an image of them, maybe description of what they're like, and more likely, most of you are also looking for a deck plan. And the problem is that this book is not built for deck plans. It is built for how to deploy them, engaging in starship battles, how to trick them out and kit them out. This is probably the weaker of all of the 4 books for Star Wars 5e. This is the one book which I think doesn't quite do what people were expecting, because the Scum and Villainies book, even though it's got vehicles, it doesn't necessarily have the things that you were particularly interested in. And I know what that is. That is stat blocks for Star Destroyers and Imperial ships, the Millennium Falcon, various troop ships or shuttles, things like that. Now, even though this covers starships, it's what it does more with is it explains how to build them. So you've got a lot of work as a game master, unfortunately, in this book. It doesn't necessarily do all the work for you. There are hundreds, thousands of different types of starships and ships and vehicles in the game for Star Wars. So I would imagine that trying to put a book together around that would be impossible. What it probably should have done is put at least the basic ones that you're familiar with that you were really going to be looking for in the first place. And unfortunately, this book doesn't do that. Now, if you are after things like deck plans and stat blocks for the various starships, the clone command base and stuff like that, if you're looking for the stat blocks for that, there are books out there that use basically a version of D&D 4E and 3.5, but mostly 3.5, that you could probably port over to Dungeons & Dragons 5E or to Star Wars 5E and use, and you'd be fine. But you would have to go and pick up the Star Wars Starships of the Galaxy for Star Wars Saga, the role-playing game. Not this one, because this isn't going to give you those things. I'm not quite sure what the idea behind doing that was. It might well be that they decided that it was better to give people options to build their own stuff, because usually when it comes to starships, most of the time you're going to be just fighting starfighters and things like. Your player characters are not necessarily going to be going after a major Star Destroyer or anything like that. You're probably jumping around in a some sort of converted ship that's used for other purposes, some sort of civil sort of purpose rather than a military purpose. So there's plenty of pictures of starships in here, but not really the stuff you were necessarily looking for, which is a shame. We've got plenty of tables in here, and yes. I'm going to keep scrolling through so that you can see the rest of it. What I want to do too is I'm pretty much over time and I was going to just stop at this point, but I will show you some of the Wretched Hives, and the Game Master book that you use for Star Wars is probably a good place to go. If you want to build adventures, it does have information on how to build sort of starship adventures and ideas around how to do that. There's a lot of general advice. If you're looking for a full-blown map of the Star Wars universe, you're probably not going to find it here. So Starship Combat is detailed in this book, by the way, and a lot more detail. Okay, if you need all that sort of stuff, it sort of looks very similar to fighting on the ground, but it's tailored for playing in the starship. And then you got your conditions also listed here. There are different conditions for starships. They're not going to be exactly the same as they are for normal characters. Okay, so that's that book there. Next, and I think, did I get to the end of that? Yes, I did. There, here we have Wretched Hives. This is the Game Master Guide. This is your book, which gives you all the other stuff that isn't in the other books that you need, okay? And you don't necessarily have to use anything in here, but there's a lot of good advice. I said downtime was a big factor. Well, yes, they have huge amounts of downtime activities in here. Step-by-step process for building factions, establishing them. There's even information on existing factions, but this book here is really about, it's designed to help you build stuff and make your own things. Bounty hunters, buying gear and carousing. You've got crafting. So there's probably, I don't want to say that they're the best crafting rules, but there's probably more information on crafting here than you probably find in the D&D 5e book for the Dungeon Master Guide. If you want to perform crime, you can engage in crime, espionage, gambling if you want to gamble, use up your money that way. Mercenary contracts if you want to pick them up. Pit fighting for those of you who just want to do your own solo battles. Racing, yes, pod racing would be potentially an option. There's even a picture of it. Research if you're into that. Selling enhanced items, so if you want to make stuff and sell it. Training, working if you want to work during your downtime. And then factions, and like I said, this is tailored more towards building your own factions with how to do that and laying it out, rather than providing you with specific factions, although there's a little bit of information. It's minuscule. Using ability scores. So you know how there's not a lot of advice around how to actually deal with ability scores? There's stuff in the player's handbook for Star Wars 5e, but this goes into a little bit more information. You get a few examples, you get some breakdowns, and it applies to a whole bunch of different things. It's not nearly enough. I would say there still needs to be a bit more here to really be helpful. I know people want numbers, DCs, and things like that. It's not necessarily going to do that for you. Equipment. We're only on page 40. There's a huge section on equipment and modifying it and how to do it. And that's just in this book here, and including weapons and equipment as well. Not just armor, but also equipment and weapons. It's all there. Lots of detail. And I'm going to stop there. What I think you should do, though, is I think you should certainly consider going and checking out this book. This is the player's handbook I've just switched to here. This is using ability scores. It's laid out exactly like the player's handbook. Same sort of process, breaks it all down, makes it easy to understand. You're not going to find your players getting too confused. So switching from your D&D or Dungeons & Dragons 5e game over to playing Star Wars Saga will actually be fairly easy for them, and the classes they're playing, some of them will feel similar, but in most respects they'll feel completely new. And what players love is playing with new toys. So it's an easy sell. Seriously, it's a really easy sell to convince somebody to switch. Adventure, movement, I'm going to stop there. Otherwise, I'm going to be here way too long. I don't want to go over every single book. It's just not going to be worth the time. This is not the only fan-made stuff out there, by the way, people. For those of you who are thinking, oh my gosh, Fred, is this the end of the fan-made 5e or D&D 5e stuff? No, there are other different IPs out there. If you go to my Patreon, you'll find a downloadable PDF that gives you a link to all of them that I've collected and put aside. I'll talk about more of them in 2024, but I really want to highly encourage you, if you're really sick and tired of just playing Dungeons & Dragons 5e and you want to shift your players over to playing a different setting rather than just fantasy, generic fantasy or Forgotten Realms, this might be the way to go if they're into Star Wars. If they like Star Wars, if they don't like Star Wars and like Mass Effect, there's a Mass Effect one. There's a whole bunch of options out there. You can definitely get them to shift. There's a reason why I've been going over these. One, because they're free. Two, because they're made by fans. They're not made by a publishing company. So they have no vested interest in how it's structured. What they do is fans just make what they think you need, okay, generally. The only exception I would have to say in this case is, unfortunately, you don't get all the vehicles you might want. Anyway, I think this is a good point to sort of stop. There is no live stream tomorrow. I'm running out of steam, and I know I am, so I'm actually going to try to look after myself a little bit more. I do have a live stream on Wally's channel where we'll be doing a Christmas special, but not on my channel. I won't be doing a live stream tomorrow on my channel, only on Wally DM's channel, and that will be later in the day. I believe it's 2 p.m. in New Zealand, which would be 5 p.m. in Pacific Standard Time, right? That's Los Angeles, California. And then Mountain Standard Time would be 6 p.m. If you're in the sort of central daylight time zone, then that would be Chicago area, 7 p.m. And if you're in Miami, Florida, that would be East Daylight Time, wouldn't it? Eastern Standard Time, that would be 8 p.m. That's going to be tomorrow. Not today. Anyway, I'm hoping that you found that useful and it was interesting, and maybe it gets you trying something else. I can assure you that playing in a Star Wars campaign is super fun. It really is cool. There's a lot to be to like about it. So thank you to all of my patrons. Thank you to Gallifil for doing this, and all the people who contributed to Star Wars 5e. You guys did a great job. I'm really quite impressed. And those of you who've been commenting in the chat, thank you. Thank you to everybody who has been watching and listening and responding to the poll. And a big, huge thank you to Prepare, Cook and Survive Overboard, who is a moderator. Fred Huber, who's a patron, thank you for being here. And I think there was there anybody else? I think that was Pale Rider. Don't forget Pale Rider. No, Pale Rider was here as well. So thank you for commenting in the chat. I do appreciate it. We're getting closer and closer to the end of the year. But that's beside the point. I'm still around. I'm working through. So yeah, wherever you are, whether it be the morning, the afternoon, the night, or the wee morning, please look after yourself, your family, and your friends. Be nice to your neighbours. And maybe try some Star Wars. You never know. Star Wars 5e might be your thing. Anyway, till next time, keep rolling those 20s.